Hello, YouTube. This is Jenserai1, and with me today is Evan Nova 95.
Hello.
And in our ears and with us in spirit is Ready 4. Now, because the last one was so well received, we're doing another one of our little answering versus video comments where we basically just look at requested matchups, and a lot of it is discussing which ones we can really unusual ones that we probably won't do but still merit discussion, whether because they're just plain interesting or maybe just so ridiculous that we can't help but laugh. So, without any further ado, let's get started. All right. So, our first comment that we're looking at is from the Personer 11, and it's a list of matchups, most of which are very good. But the one we want to discuss is Oporensis versus Lord Scare Khan.
Oh, the name.
The name. Anywho, the reason why we can't really pursue this matchup is because we don't really have enough information on Lord Khan. It's like we got just enough on Oppo Rens. Well, we got enough
hmm
information on Oppo Rensis. We could handle him no problem. Evan
hmm
has handled him no problem. The problem
Indeed.
is that pretty much the only assumption I can really make about Lord Khan is that he probably uses Nyman because he stated that he's develops as a jack of all trades force wielder, so it fits. But we don't know anything about his responses in battle. We don't even know how good he is as a swordsman. We don't know how he can contend with the power of other force wielders. It's like we've got the really impressive feat of being able to basically just mind dominate the entire Sith Order. Like that in and of itself is impressive, and from that we could gauge his approximate power level, but we don't know anything about
Still
how
not
he
too much.
fights or what he
Yeah.
can do or anything. There are just too many unknowns. That being said, it does have a really interesting common theme in that they are both masters of battle meditation and telepathy. And
Something even the commenter notes that's part of his interest in this to begin with.
yeah, it's definitely an interesting discussion, but it's just not really
Mhm.
doable because there's not even enough information on Lord Khan for me to do something with him. And I specialize in using super lightly featured characters where there's very little information on them. Like Warp
Warp null
Null.
for the win. Yeah.
Yeah, Warp Null for the win, but Lord Khan, there's not enough there even for me. And it's sad because I'd
Mhm.
actually like to use Lord Khan. He's interesting, but oh well.
Just not enough. Just not
Just
enough.
not just not enough. All right. And the next comment on our little list comes from Trash. And his requested matchup is Johan Othone versus Clone Wars era Kakruk.
Oh dear. Okay,
Unfortunately,
I'm just gonna be straight up with this one. Kukrook would eat Johan Othone alive. It's not even in question, which
it,
it's ridiculously one-sided because Johan Othone's actually pretty pathetic.
well, I wouldn't call him pathetic, but he is
Well, maybe not
completely
pathetic, but really
he's completely baseline. There's just nothing
right.
that distinguishes him. It's like I wish we had some information on how well Johan functioned as a combatant during the Sith
Mhm.
Wars, because that's when I
Exactly.
think he was
Well,
at
and
his
as a
peak.
fighter. Yeah.
But by his own admission, during the post-war years, he let his skills go to rot because he was more concerned with being a diplomat. So that Johan he's just not very good. And
No,
Kakruk, it's like, well, it's like
even
what
though
is Kakruk?
Kukrook, I know a lot of people like downplay Kukrook because he has lost his fair share of fights, but I think what a lot of people don't quite understand is the people he's losing to are like some of the pinnacle of their era. General Grievous, Asajj Ventress, even Quinlan Voss to a degree. Kukrook's not an unskilled Jedi. He's actually really capable. His problem is he just keeps getting pitted against people who are ridiculously powerful.
People who outclass him. And even
Yeah.
then, he still gives him a damn good fight. Because it's like, what does he have going for him? Well, he's got a huge amount of combat experience. His combat skills are actually polished and up to snuff because we're talking about wartime era Kakruk versus
Mm-hmm.
Johun after 10 years of stagnation. And thirdly, Kakruk he's unkillable. His in
Yeah.
his yeah, it's like it's like what I was saying about Vader in our last video where it's like the only way to kill him is to stab him through the center of the chest, decapitate him, or cleave him in half. Well, I'd say the same applies to Kakruk.
Pretty much.
If you're not hitting him with an immediately fatal death blow,
You won't die.
He won't die. You'll think he's dead because he's lying there not moving, but he's not dead.
No, just hibernating.
Yeah.
So no, Kakruk would defeat Johan Othon pretty handily. So it's just not really worth pursuing.
Yeah. It's like I hate to hit Johan that hard because he is Lord Hoth's apprentice, and I'm certain that during the war he was probably like Chaos Enderach light. But since then, he's just nothing to write home about because, well, he's the quintessential Nyman practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
So, moving on to our next comment on the list from Unlimited X53, who presents a list of matches, most of which are pretty good, but the one we're here to address directly is Starkiller versus Darth Kaidos. Like, I'm assuming he's referring to the Starkiller clone from Force Unleashed 2, because that's
most likely the one actually named Starkiller.
Yeah. Well, I did kind of go and refer to Galen Merrick as Starkiller in my most recent video, but whatever.
How dare you?
We'll not talk about that. But so we're assuming he's well, I figure we should probably just make a little quickly discuss Galen Merrick versus Darth Kaidos, but either way, it's kind of weird in that it's almost exact opposites. It's Kaidos has a huge amount of developed power and skill, but he's not very consistent in his application. He drops the ball a lot and takes hits a lot. And really, it's like so many of his victories are just due to desperation tactics rather than actually being good. Whereas Galen Merrick doesn't really have much in the way of developed power. He's very much style over substance, but he's very, very, very clever and intelligent in his application, and his performance is very, very consistent. However, I don't see this as being enough to make up for the power differential because the problem is that Kaidos, despite his inconsistency, he doesn't have any obvious weaknesses that Merrick can exploit. And it's like, even if he gets a hit in, Kaidos can probably tank because, well...
Kaidos is ridiculously resilient.
Yeah, it's Darth Red. It's like he's like master level Darth Red. It's like just rush in as violently as he can and try and tear you apart. And if he takes any hits, whatever, I'll keep fighting.
Exactly.
Whereas, like, the big reason why, well, firstly, talking about Galen Merrick, the big reason why Galen Merrick is so successful against fighters like Shaak Ti and Darth Vader is his skills are just good enough to be able to contend with them. And then he always has one specific advantageous attribute that he can capitalize on. So it's like against Shaak Ti, he was just good enough to be able to contend with her swordsmanship, and he was physically stronger than her, so he was able to shove her off balance. Against Vader, just good enough to contend with Vader's skill, and he had enough dexterity to slip around Vader's stilted movements and kind of deflect the brunt of his bulldozer assault. Problem is, Kaidos is just as dexterous, just as strong. There's no path of least resistance he can take. It's like...
No.
So it's like this is one of those matchups where Kaidos would actually be able to dominate pretty handily because he outclasses his opponent, so he can just dominate by being powerful.
Like, yeah, exactly. Kaidos, I just think Kaidos, it would just be overwhelmed. I just think Kaidos would just be too much for him.
Kaidos's problems only really come up when he's pitted against fighters of equal or greater skill, and you know they're just if he's going against someone he straight up outclasses, like Galen Merrick or the Starkiller clone, he wins. And the Starkiller clone is and the Starkiller clone is kind of worse than Galen Merrick because, well, he switches over to the dual blades and really just goes for offensive output rather than, clever, adaptable reconfiguring style. It's so
exactly. So either way, be it Galen Merrick or Starkiller, Kaidos just sweeps the board way too handily.
Yeah, the skill differential is just too great. So
too great. Yeah,
Kaidos's inconsistency, He'll probably take a hit or two because of his inconsistency, but it
But it
won't be
won't
like,
matter.
yeah, it won't be crippling hits. It'll just be like, oh, I've lost more blood and I have another scar to add to my collection. Great. Now I look scarier. Woo!
Okay, and the next comment comes from Matthew Maida, who requested the Battle of Count Dooku's Apprentices, aka Kamari Voza versus Asajj Ventress. And yeah, that's a
It's
little
not
bit.
really much of a fight because
It really
they're,
isn't because
well,
Kamari Mosa is definitely impressive in her own right, but she's not really. She's just not. She's frankly just not as skilled as Ventress. She's not on that level.
the thing is that they're the exact same fighter type with pretty much the
Hmm.
exact same skills and powers, but Komari Bosa is way below Ventress because
Hmm.
Komari didn't complete Jedi
No.
training. She's basically a washout Padawan who then got roped in by a cult and turned to the dark side. It's
Yeah. I
it's
mean, she
she's def-
did get defeated by Jango Fett, and I don't. We shouldn't downplay Jango Fett because Jango Fett's a very skilled combatant, but he's still Jango Fett.
yeah. It's it's like she's not bad, but she's not great
No.
either. And it's like she's kind of an example of wasted potential.
Hmm.
And so she's definitely impressive, but she's not on Ventress's level because sure,
No.
Ventress did not complete her Jedi training because Kynarik was killed before she could, but Dooku more than picked up the slack. Dooku
Yeah.
elevated her skills to the point where she could compete with Jedi Council masters, and frankly, I just don't see Komari Bosa doing that, especially after her performance in Darth Maul Lockdown, where she contended with
Hmm.
Darth Maul with just a single lightsaber, not his double blader, and Darth Maul basically was like, oh,
Tore her to pieces
yeah, he ripped her
with
apart.
negligible difficulty. So it's really it's pretty much a pretty done deal. And let's not forget that Ventress is also ridiculously more experienced than her when it comes to fighting other saber wielders, not just in terms of more training, but just actual combat experience.
Yeah, it's like Komari Vosa may have created those lightsabers, but those are Asajj Ventress's lightsabers.
Yeah, she earned them more than she did. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. Now, I am definitely interested in doing something with Komari Vosa in the future, but not against Ventress. That is too much
Mm,
of a mismatch.
way too much. Yeah, so like it's just too one-sided to be really interesting.
Yep. So our next comment is from Terrell Allen. And there are a couple matchups on here, but the one we're here to discuss is Zane versus Zach. Zane Carrick versus, I know who Zach is, but I can't remember his last name.
He's usually just referred to as Zek.
Okay.
Hmm.
Well,
Yeah, no. I know Zach doesn't seem too impressive because he's always getting his ass kicked by Jaina in sparring matches, but that's really only because it's
Jaina.
Jaina. In
It's
fact, Zek is actually really highly regarded within the new Jedi Order as a very skilled field operative. And yeah, Zane Carrick is Zane Carrick.
Zane Carrick is he's not great, he's unique. The thing
Right.
is that he didn't complete his Jedi training. He's kind of a self-taught adept with an inconsistent ability to wield the Force. It's He's the sort of person who always succeeds because of circumstantial factors, which is by design. That's kind of the way his
Hmm.
Force connection interacts with the world around him. It influences circumstance and probability, but as a result, he doesn't really have much in the way of developed skill. So in a
No.
direct head-to-head with another Force wielder, especially someone of Zek's skill, he just can't win.
No, it's a done deal. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, he's pretty much the scout of his era, which isn't the worst situation you could possibly be in. But again, like you said, against an adept like Zek, who's just more experienced, more trained, and just pretty much better in every category, it's just again done deal.
yep. All right. So our next comment comes from Kiati Sandwich.
Great
Love
name, by
that
the
name.
way. Yeah.
And he presents a list of matchups, but the one we want to discuss is Darth Bane versus Yariel Poof.
Oh dear.
It I don't want to lowball Yariel Poof because he is a master of telepathy. He is damn
hmm
impressive in his own right. The problem is that if Bane was able to defend against Zana's spells of fear and madness and, not be driven insane and regain his composure almost immediately, then Yariel
hmm
Poof's telepathy isn't going to do anything to him. And
No,
Bane completely outclasses Yariel Poof as a swordsman.
completely.
It's just
Not even in
because
question.
not even a question. So it's basically like Yariel Poof hits him with telepathy. Bane's like, fuck you, Jedi.
Yeah. He'd definitely probably be able to stagger him for a brief time, and I can see some of Yayo Poof's more unique abilities being able to undermine Bane for a brief period of time. But like you said, when it really just comes down to a head-to-head engagement, Yayo Poof
Yeah.
just doesn't have enough going for him.
It's like he can subvert Bane, but he can't follow it up and actually kill him.
No.
Because the problem is that the second you start subverting Bane, what's Bane's immediate response? Channel the dark side, unleash his
Yeah.
fury, raw dark side power everywhere.
Yeah, and it would just be too much for Yayo Poof to deal with. He's just not packing enough power.
Yeah. Yariel
Well, at
Poof
least he's not
versus
packing enough power in the way that you would need to defend against something like that.
yeah, he's
He's
definitely
definitely
powerful,
powerful, and I don't think
but
we shouldn't
he,
undersell that, but he's not powerful in the correct way.
yeah, he's not powerful in the right way to deal with a juggernaut like Bane.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
moving on to our next comment from Tanner Lowry. He also
Another
presents
list.
a long list. All of them are good. We're here to discuss Kasim versus Rasta Lasso. Not because it's a mismatch. It's not.
No,
The,
it's
the
actually pretty close. The problem again comes down to obscurity of the characters presented.
Yeah, specifically Rasta, because we do get
Yeah.
enough from Kasim in Path of Destruction that I actually have an analysis of him waiting in the wings. That the only reason I haven't used it yet is because of lack of images.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the problem is Rasta because
Yeah, because we really don't know how she functions on her own because the only time we ever see her fight is when she has a group to back her up.
yeah, and it's actually specifically noted that she poured all of her energy into lightsaber combat and let her force abilities go to rot because she's optimized for fighting as part of a team. Basically,
Right.
it's like this woman doesn't even really have much of a TK barrier or any force defenses. She's a pure
No.
physical combatant, which is a serious problem. It may not, that sort of weakness may not be likely to come up in a fight with Kasim because Kasim is, well, it's like Kasim is the same way, but he's a bit more intelligent. He's like, okay, I
hmm
value my lightsaber skills more than my force abilities, but force defense is still something I need to address.
Yeah, he hasn't left all of his bases uncovered.
Yeah, and he can still perform a force push. Like
Yeah.
it's specifically shown, he force pushes Darth Bane. So yeah, it's so the problem is that Raskta, we don't know how she functions by herself, and
hmm
frankly, even if we did, that well, it's almost like she's like, what if Grievous was a biologic instead of a robot?
Yeah. Yeah, that sums it up pretty perfectly, actually.
Yeah, it's like no force defenses. And, well, truthfully, I actually think Kasim is not necessarily better than her, but more likely to win because of his
hmm
conjoining lightsabers. He's got way more options in combat. He can change
Yeah,
up his
way more
fighting style in
versatility.
some pretty dramatic ways. Whereas
hmm
Rasta, she's got two lightsabers. That's it. It's like she can
That's it.
basically switch between single saber or two sabers, whereas Kasim can do single saber, two sabers, double saber.
hmm Exactly. So you add all that up, and then you consider the Rasta's obscurity, and it's just a match that unfortunately can't be pursued. Would be a fun one. If we could, we would totally do this one, but as it stands, we just can't.
Yeah, which makes me sad. It's super interesting.
Yeah.
All right, and our next comment is from Rob George. Again, he presents a
Another
pretty
list.
another list, and I like a lot of the matchups on this list. But the one we're here to discuss is Coleman Trebor versus Grandmaster Zim, which he specifically stated is a joke matchup. So he clearly made that request for this video. Thank you,
And
Bob George.
And it's glorious. You have the most pathetic Grandmaster in the history of the Order versus the most pathetic Council Master in the history of the Order. Both gotten taken out by bounty hunters in just a few seconds.
I will give Grandmaster Zim a little bit of credit in that at least he wasn't gunned down with a blaster. He was at least shot in the face with a rocket launcher. So it's like the fact that a Grandmaster got taken out in that way is kind of stupid, but at least it's not as pathetic as Coleman Trebor, a Surisu practitioner.
With 360-degree vision, yeah.
Yeah.
But then you also have to consider the fact that Braden is definitely a lesser bounty hunter in terms of skill compared to Jango Fett.
Yeah. But at least he used a rocket launcher.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, I can accept, Grandmaster Zim dropping the ball in that specific instance, especially because it's kind of noted that defending against missiles and rockets with the Force is actually very, very difficult.
Right.
But he could have dodged.
So fast and so destructive. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot he could have done in that situation to avoid that. So in terms of who would win between the two of them,
it would definitely be Grandmaster Zim because he can at least make active use of his Force abilities and his lightsabers. He didn't fail because he dropped the ball as a swordsman. He failed because he dropped the ball as a Force wielder. Whereas it's like I'm pretty sure that the only thing Coleman Trebor is packing are those lightsaber skills, which means that Master Zim doesn't really have anything to worry about. But it's like, wow.
It doesn't help that they're still both pretty freaking pathetic, but it is pretty hilarious. So Zim would probably take this one, but it would still be pretty ridiculous.
Yes. Now, our last comment is from Speckham17, and he actually presented a whole chain of comments with various matchups, a lot of which were actually pretty good. But the one we're looking at and discussing right now is Darth Nihil versus Revan. Unfortunately, this is a mismatch because Darth Nihil is not incompetent. He's
definitely skilled in his own right.
He definitely merits his place in Krait's inner circle. However, he's extremely inconsistent.
Extremely.
I kind of personally see Darth Nihil as a Darth Revan wannabe who wasn't able to make it work. He's got that same jack of all trades skill set, but instead of, trying to assess the opponent and calculate the best response, he's instead thinking more in like, okay, this skill is radically different from what I'm using now, which should maximize the shock value. Let's switch. Oh shit, the guy's perfectly prepared to defend against that. That was a waste. Shit.
There goes my arm.
The problem with Nihil is that he tries to be unpredictable, but he's merely random.
Yeah. And that really wouldn't be enough to subvert someone like Revan.
Yeah. It would be like Revan's fight with Bandon. Like, granted, Revan in that situation has two party members backing him up, but so does Bandon.
Yeah. So it kind of evens out. But that's pretty a good analogy on how this would go. I mean, I could definitely see Nihil posing a threat to Revan, most definitely. But at the end of the day, Revan would rip him to shreds.
It would basically be the fight between Mace Windu and Asajj Ventress from Jedi Mace Windu all over again. It's like, you're good enough that you can contend with this person and resist them, but there's no way you can win, so run.
Yep. So just too much of a mismatch, so we wouldn't pursue this one either.
But still worth discussing because Nihil is ostensibly a similar fighter type, but he's just not quite able to make it work. Because, he's almost got that same sort of conceit as Exar Kun, where he wants to rack up as many alternative skills to make himself as strategically viable as possible, but he wants all of those all of those tricks to be self-contained things that he has on his
Mhm.
person and can always do, so he's not beholden to circumstantial factors. Whereas Revan does that, but he's also aware of circumstantial factors and takes
Mhm.
advantage of stuff like that, whereas Niall doesn't.
Yeah, he's just
He's
a lot more skilled at covering his basis in the heat of the moment.
Yeah. Whereas Niall is just he's too direct and he's too scattershot. It's like
Exactly.
a scattershot skill set that's applied in a far he's too just way too direct in application. Whereas what he
Exactly.
needs to be is sketchy and slippery, but instead, yeah.
Yeah, so it just wouldn't work out. And that officially takes care of all the requests.
Yeah. This was fun. Guys, keep pumping
Mhm.
them out. Like
Think of the most
more
absurd things you possibly can.
Liam the Padawan versus Emperor Vitiate.
I knew you were gonna bring that up at one point. Your obsession with that match knows no bounds, does it?
Nope. I actually want to do it because it'd be a great April Fool's vid, and it's got an interesting theme in that the two characters are complete opposites in every way, shape, and form. One of them is a little kid who's just starting out his Jedi training, has an uncluttered mind, a basic skill set, but is insightful. Whereas the other guy is a several thousand-year-old Sith immortal who's hoarding knowledge and trying to command the universe.
Yeah, little bit of a difference.
So discussing it from a philosophical standpoint, it'd be interesting, but obviously,
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of an obvious conclusion. But
yes.
anyway, I'm Evan Nova95. We hope you guys enjoyed. We'll see you guys later.
Gensarai 1 signing off. Have a nice day.